Spider-Man 4.
That was a tough secret to sit on because
Check it
I
out.
have a reputation for ruining things, and I
Yeah,
like
I've heard that
strategically have done
you're
no
a little
press.
loose-lipped
A
around
little
MCU
loose-lipped.
secrets.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. There's a brand new report about the title of Spider-Man
You
4,
sound
so we'll
weird.
break it all down. There's also a lot of talk
his
about
real
what's going on in the
voice.
movie with everything that's happening during Venom: The Last Dance, Null, God of Symbiotes, their bigger plans for the King in Black storyline from the Venom comics, and there's also a real sly connection to the Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider movies too with Spider-Man 4. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. If you didn't see the news recently in your feeds, the working title for Spider-Man 4 is reportedly Blue Oasis. So a lot of people are like, wait a minute, what does that mean? What is that a reference to? Currently, the biggest theory is that it's a reference to the Spider-Man Blue storyline. During that, it's a Jeff Loeb comic book retelling the story of some old Spider-Man comics with his love for Gwen Stacy, but in a new context during Valentine's Day when he's with Mary Jane in the future. So it's a really depressed Spider-Man on Valentine's Day when he's with Mary Jane recounting his relationship with Gwen Stacy. And throughout the story, they sort of retell that as if he's flashing back to how he fell in love with Gwen Stacy. So it's sort of him reckoning with Gwen Stacy's death in new context, and Mary Jane being really nice about it, sort of helping him try to get over his broken heart and everything that happened back then. While this news was dropping, there were also rumors that there was an actress who's up for a version of Gwen Stacy in the movie. I don't know how true this is because I haven't seen it from any of the more reliable sites talking about it, but supposedly Madeline Klein might be a version of Gwen Stacy in the movie. This is actually a picture of her dressing up as Spider-Gwen, but personally I do not believe this rumor right now. I don't think that Gwen Stacy is going to be in the movie, at least until we get some more actual evidence. So far, the Spider-Man MCU movies have not referenced Gwen Stacy yet, but they could always change that in Tom Holland's next trilogy of movies like Spider-Man 4, 5, and 6. There's still a ton of core Spider-Man characters that the MCU movies have not even touched yet. The working title could also just be a sly reference to him being depressed about what happened with MJ and not being with her because the spell caused her to forget him. So it could be like a connection to the Spider-Man Blue storyline where he's remembering how he fell in love with this girl. In the case, it's not Gwen Stacy, it's just MJ of the MCU movies. But according to all the reports about the way they're slotting this movie in after Avengers 5 Doomsday, before Avengers 6 Secret Wars, there will be a lot of multiverse stuff happening in it, and they will break Doctor Strange's spell, so people will remember Peter Parker inside the MCU. That MJ, Ned, all his friends, everybody that knows him would also remember Peter Parker.
Stop it.
If you're not familiar with the whole concept of a working title on a movie, working titles are not the same thing as final titles. So for instance, Spider-Man Homecoming's working title was Summer of George, which is a reference to a Seinfeld episode title where George is fired from the New York Yankees, wallowing in his idleness. They give him 3 months pay as severance, and he just treats it like a 3-month vacation. John Watts, the director, said that they picked this as the working title of the movie because when they were actually writing the movie and working on early production for it, they kept being obsessed with Seinfeld episodes. So they just kept talking about Seinfeld during their production meetings and just decided, hey, why don't we just make the working title one of these Seinfeld titles? So it was mostly a gag on their part that they continued with Spider-Man Far From Home, the next movie, calling it The Fall of George, which is not based on an actual Seinfeld episode title. But they used the metaphor for Spider-Man, like he was the George Costanza in this situation, the fall of Spider-Man, so to speak, with Mysterio plot causing him to fall from grace at the end of the movie when he revealed his identity and framed him for murder, setting up Spider-Man Far From Home, which also continued the Seinfeld jokes, but in a different context. The working title for Far From Home was Serenity Now, which also is not the title of a Seinfeld episode. It's a phrase Frank Costanza, George's father, learns from a self-help recording instead of going to a help center himself, like getting actual help. So it becomes more of an ironic statement because he starts shouting Serenity Now, and it winds up having the opposite effect.
Serenity now! Serenity now! Serenity now!
I don't even know.
Serenity now!
It winds up making things worse,
on?
and eventually it comes to mean serenity now, insanity later, as in you just get worse and worse and worse. So it's more of a metaphor of how crazy Spider-Man's world gets throughout the movie, progressively worse and worse and worse, starting with the Mysterio reveal of his identity, the lawsuits, then spinning into the multiverse plot where things get really bad with Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield showing up, and the Sinister Six, and them having to deal with that. So now the Spider-Man Blue Oasis, working title for Spider-Man 4, sounds like his some reckoning with all the craziness that's happened, him being super depressed because nobody remembers him. Wally's in the middle of
Makes
trying to be
sense.
friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, just helping
He ain't
people
gonna
out
have no
using his
friends,
abilities,
no
trying to be
family,
good.
nothing.
The cool connection back to Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider movies isn't that Ghost Rider's actually in the movie, it's actually through Blaze Films, one of the production companies that worked on his Ghost Rider movies, is also working on Spider-Man 4. Like I said though, that doesn't mean that Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider is going to show up in Spider-Man 4, even though there is some multiverse stuff happening. There's a lot of Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom stuff that
That
they'll
would be
probably
pretty
rope
dope
in
if we
because
get
it's
him
happening right
in
after
there, though.
Avengers 5 Doomsday. One of the reasons why they're probably coming back to work on Spider-Man 4 is just because, in general, they tend to work a lot with Sony on both film and video game, other related stuff. Just Sony as a giant company in general. If you don't remember, Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider movie was released by Sony, not by Fox. But there's been so much talk about this new King in Black storyline that Sony is trying to set up with its Venom movies over on
No.
its side of things in the multiverse, roping in Tom Holland's Spider-Man and everything that's happening with the future of him and his symbiote that Venom left behind at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home in the post-credit scene. So by the time that movie releases, we'll have already seen the downer ending in Avengers 5 when his Doctor Doom spanks the new Avengers all over the place and the other MCU heroes. Meaning that Spider-Man 4 will have to address that in some way on a story level. Now, I'm not expecting a huge Doctor Doom presence in Spider-Man 4 because they're already doing so much with the new Spider-Man villains they're introducing, other new main characters, the Venom symbiote storyline with the Null character. I don't think the movie can handle a major Doctor Doom subplot
And
on
we
top
got
of that.
Kraven
So
coming
until we
too.
see more evidence, I'm just assuming the
But
movie
I
will
don't know if
reference
that's in
him
the
in
MCU.
some way. But as Tom Holland says, the movie needs to make sense in the timeline between Avengers 5 and Avengers 6.
For sure.
Everybody's been posting the I Hate You 3000 memes for when his Spider-Man learns about Doctor Doom. Why do you look so much like my best friend Tony Stark who died, and why are you so evil? It's kind of funny how physically Robert Downey Jr. himself might not actually show up in Spider-Man 4, yet he's had this massive influence over the actual plot of the movie and over the future of the Spider-Man character just in general inside the MCU, completely separate from what his Doctor Doom is actually going to be doing while he is around. Everywhere I go, I see his face. On a story level, though, I think what Tom Holland also means is that after his adventures fighting this new Doctor Doom that he's playing, Spider-Man will fundamentally be changed going forward into Marvel Phase 7. That Spider-Man 5
Yeah, I
movie
think we're
winds
gonna
up
get a
turning
new
into.
Spider-Man after
He
that,
also
to
talks a
be
lot about the
honest.
deadlines that they're working up against too, like they are cooking full steam ahead. How do they go bigger than Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and their Sinister Six villains showing up for like a big crossover event? Well, it turns out, the way people are
can't
talking,
really.
that it seems like it involves Null, God of Symbiotes, Avengers 5 Doomsday, and what's happening with Avengers 6 Secret
That's
Wars.
the only way.
Supposedly Sony's
after
new plan,
that,
which I
I
guess
don't
is
know what you
Marvel's
do.
plan too, because they have to agree on what Spider-Man 4 is going to be together, like Marvel and Sony have to come to terms. Marvel can't do anything that it wants with the movie. They're now going to use this delay in when they start Spider-Man 4 when it comes out. It's going to be released between Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, meaning
Damn,
that
that's gonna be
potentially the
good-ass
multiverse won't
time.
exist anymore by the end of Avengers 5. So how do they explain the timeline? Like, does Spider-Man 4 take place on Battleworld, or do they pull an Ant-Man and the Wasp? My assumption is that that's what they will do. Like, they'll move the timeline of Spider-Man 4 so that the end of the movie, like Ant-Man and the Wasp ending, happened just after the snap, but the movie mostly took place before the snap happened. Spider-Man is supposed to be a big character in Avengers 5, so supposedly he will go on
Gonna
that
be one of the
adventure.
leaders.
Then we'll have the events of Spider-Man 4. Then we'll have Secret Wars with like Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield coming back.
We don't
So
know
what
that
they'll
yet.
probably do is they'll have Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom show up during Avengers Doomsday in the MCU, fight all the MCU characters, and they'll do their own version of Time Runs Out. Then there'll be a little timeline trickery with the events of Spider-Man 4 where that goes down, some multiverse elements as the multiverse starts to continually break down. You have to remember the Incursion's already doing that, but Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom is going to have a plot that's similar to that from Doctor Doom in Time Runs Out, where he basically winds up collapsing the rest of the multiverse into a single world called Battleworld with a whole bunch of multiverse characters running around.
And then they're gonna
My
get
assumption is
cooked
that they'll
there.
have like the main fight of Avengers 5 Doomsday against that Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom. Then Spider-Man will leave and go off to the events of Spider-Man 4 as you start to see more multiverse characters showing up during that movie.
It's gonna be
And then at the
interesting to
end
see
of
how they
Spider-Man
have
4,
it.
they'll do like a little
after
bit of a
that.
time jump where the rest of the multiverse collapses and you wake up in Avengers 6 on Battleworld with a bunch of other multiverse characters. That's the only way to explain how you have your own separate Spider-Man story that feels like a self-contained Spider-Man story, but tie it to the larger Avengers 5 and Avengers 6 storyline. Just playing a little fast and loose with where the timeline of that movie takes place. When it comes to that other movie on his contract, my guess for the extra mystery MCU Marvel movie will wind up being the Null crossover film. And it won't
Hopefully,
just be an
that would be
MCU
really
movie,
good.
it'll be like a Marvel-Sony co-production. And they'll just do that
We
as a
need
totally
that.
separate Avengers Endgame level event, but for just Spider-Man related characters, with Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield coming back again. There's a bunch of big stuff coming up, and speaking
Kraven.
of Spider-Man related movies, Sony is getting ready to
Bro, they
release
need
the
to make 'em
Kraven
just
movie.
like the
It's full
game,
Kraven
bro.
time. I just did a new video for that and what's
You
going on
played
behind the
Spider-Man
scenes at Sony.
2?
There's been a lot
Oh
of
my
chaos
God, he
as they
was so
start
OP.
retune their entire movie plan around Null and everything that he's doing. Click here to learn about all the fresh hell that's going on with that, and click here for my
That's
new
it
Venom.
for today. Oh, well, like, comment, and subscribe.